I predict in the next 10 years that crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin, all of this innovation will be the 12th sector of the S&P.
Welcome to Dream Richer. What do you think is the easiest way for Bitcoin to hit $2 million? According to Kevin O'Leary, the answer is simple: large institute adoption. Mr. Wonderful argues that if we want the crypto to go to the moon, then large capital needs to flow into the space. This cannot happen just through retail investing. Instead, crypto needs a worldwide adoption that has never been seen before, that would attract central banks and larger whales into the game. But how does Kevin O'Leary think that this mass adoption would come about? The answer: regulation. This solution is quite controversial, because many crypto investors argue that crypto was made with the intention of staying decentralized. Hence, regulation is the last thing crypto needs to see. According to Kevin O'Leary, this is the inevitable solution. It's the only way that large firms that currently hold zero Bitcoin would ever choose to have skin in the game. The day regulation enters the crypto market, it would see one of the biggest adoptions ever, and hence the biggest boom in crypto prices. Mr. Kevin goes as far as to say that this adoption would happen at such a large scale that crypto could end up becoming the 12th sector of the S&P 500. Warren Buffett is one of the most notable advocates of the S&P 500. As of yet, the S&P 500 is a stock market index that does not hold any sort of crypto. Instead, it only tracks the performance of the top 500 U.S. companies listed on stock exchange. Today, Mr. Wonderful shows the 5 regulations that are about to enter the crypto market. Regulation is no longer a question of if, but when.
These massive pools of capital, these trillion-dollar pools, own this much crypto. This much. Practically nothing. It's the purvey of high net worth individuals, hedge funds, and retail investors. And that's okay. But what we're missing is policy. When we get policy and the regulator regulates, that's not a negative thing. The spigots of capital are going to flood into this sector like you've never seen. And so for those of us that can invest in it now, you're getting ahead of what's going to be a huge wave of interest when policy occurs. I predict in the next 10 years that crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin, all of this innovation will be the 12th sector of the S&P. Now, why do I say that? Because Bitcoin is not a coin, it's software. Ethereum is software. Now, what we need is policy. We need government to catch up with us so that we don't lose leadership in America to this very important 12th sector of the economy. There's no question. So let me give you a quick update, because I've been spending a lot of time in Washington in the last 3 months, a lot of time. And the good news is, on a bipartisan basis, there are many senators and reps that are thinking about this in a proactive way. So I'm going to give you what I'm calling the 5 vectors of policy and give you an update on where we're at on this stuff, because I've actually read these bills. They're big. That signals that regulation is coming, and that is a good thing. That's vector number 1. Vector number 2, the president himself, in his direct order, his executive order, talked about crypto as something that he wouldn't make illegal. That was the most important message in there. But there was also a concern about climate change, which I'll get to in a minute. Then there's BlackRock, the Larry Fink mandate that has discussed this sector as well, also a concern about ESG and climate change. Last night at 6 o'clock, Bill Haggerty dropped a bill. 2 pages. I spoke to the senator last night. A 2-page bill that would make stable coins legal. This is a genius piece of legislature. If it's 2 pages, every senator can read it. And it's very simple. What this says is this: why is this any different than a money market fund? Why can't we have a simple audit every 30 days with the underlying...
Regulation is inevitable. This became seemingly more clearer with the recent executive order Mr. Joe Biden passed on cryptocurrency. The executive order states that the government needs to ensure responsible development of digital assets. This, of course, includes assets such as Bitcoin and Ethereum. Besides the much-needed regulation, Mr. Kevin O'Leary argues that stablecoins are yet to see the biggest growth in the future besides Bitcoin. Stablecoins are cryptocurrencies where the price is generally pegged to a fiat currency. The most famous stablecoins that are currently pegged one-to-one with the US currency include Tether, also called USDT, and BUSD. The reason these stablecoins will see the biggest growth, according to Mr. Wonderful, is simple. Once stablecoins are backed up by central banks and US dollar, then we could see the whole planet shift to a digital currency. As he puts it, stablecoins would become the reserve currency of the earth. But again, in order for the central banks to come into play, regulation must happen. Mr. Kevin argues that it's not the job of the government to push for these regulations. Instead, it's in the best interest of the free market, which includes all types of investors, including retail, to also demand a more regulated crypto.
Security and side. So maybe the best way to approach this for all of us that are interested in crypto is to pick one pillar of value. And right now, I would argue that stablecoins are one of the fastest growing asset classes outside of Bitcoin, and help this become policy and law, and watch what happens. And the reason you should care is, if it's backed by the US dollar, it will become the reserve currency of the earth. That's what will happen. And why would we want to give that up to any other country? Why would we ever give that innovation up? So let's regulate this. Let's get behind this bill and make it happen. And I'm not asking the federal government to write one line of code. That's not their job. Let the free market, let the private sector develop these stablecoin products and let them compete, just like Fidelity competes with their money market fund, like Schwab competes. They're regulated and everybody uses them when they have a cash balance on their account. Let's do the same thing here. 2 weeks ago in the EU, they tried to ban proof of work because they were so concerned about how much carbon it was doing. Now, here's why Bitcoin mining is going to save the world. If this policy gets implemented, because it's also in the ESG mandate that Larry Fink at BlackRock put in place, and it's also mentioned directly deep in the executive order of the president himself. It's a direct swipe at Bitcoin mining. But why is Bitcoin mining good for the earth? Because the next generation of Bitcoin miners, and some of them are represented right here, are starting to work with energy that does not require carbon. Hydroelectricity and nuclear power, wind and solar. The drive to produce Bitcoin is so economic in value that they will go ahead and fund the next generation of machines and turbines. 90% of dams built in America in the last 100 years contemplated hydroelectricity, but never installed the turbines. I'll install the turbines. Why? Because it's great economics if I can use that and not be hassled by a carbon audit. This is the future of Bitcoin mining. We will be developing power for all communities while we mine coin in an ethical and 100% green mandate that we can do with hydroelectricity. Now, the beautiful strategy here is when we get policy, this is the Loomis bill right here, and there's lots of good news in this thing, when we make Bitcoin an allocation for institutions, which they do not have yet, what I predict will happen, they will put between 50 basis points and 3 basis points or 300 basis points into their portfolios. How much money is that? Trillions of dollars. So if you want to see Bitcoin appreciate in value, if you're an advocate like I am, because it's software and it's a property and maybe it's a currency, you want regulation. You embrace this and you stand back and watch the capital pour.
It's clear from Mr. Wonderful's explanation that Bitcoin is one of the best investments right now because it could see large upside movement in near future. These digital assets are here to stay and are yet to see the biggest growth in history, given the 5 inevitable regulations that are about to enter the market. According to Kevin O'Leary, one of the biggest hurdles to the development of Bitcoin is the SEC's adoption of carbon-neutral audits. If SEC adopts this policy, it could be very bad news for Bitcoin mining and proof of work at large. In fact, we could see proof of work banned altogether if the SEC pushed for approved carbon-neutral audits. But Mr. Wonderful argues this hurdle could in fact be good news for Bitcoin mining and the world at large. Why? Because Bitcoin mining would then have to be carried out through ethical and green power, hence creating a more sustainable future. Do you agree with Kevin O'Leary's argument for a more centralized and regulated crypto? Let us know in comments below. To learn more about the latest crypto news, watch these videos here.